Resident Evil 3 is a remake of a game from 1999 and a sequel to the Resident Evil 2 from 2019. Resident Evil 3 takes place before and after Resident Evil 2, so I guess you can call this a prequel and a sequel. Maybe a pre-sequel. I don't really know what they were thinking with this. The original game from 1999 was directed by... oh boy. Sorry for pronouncing this name wrong. Kazuhiro Aoyama. Again, sorry for that. And the game was developed again by Capcom. The sequel is again developed by Capcom, and the director are... oh my god. These are many hard names to pronounce. Okay, let's try it, but sorry in advance for saying this name is completely wrong. Kiyohiko Sakata, Yasuhiro Seto, Yasuhiro Anapo, Yukio Ando. Again, sorry for pronouncing these names completely wrong. In my last review of Resident Evil 2, I compared the original game from 1998 with the remake from 2019's graphic. However, I don't see a reason to put in the time to talk about something that looks like a dog turd that had been painted with all rainbows colored. Happy Pride, by the way. I don't see a reason to compare Resident Evil 3's graphic with the previous one, because it's just 1 year apart from each other. However, we can talk about the gameplay, because there is quite a lot of changes actually from the previous one. And I would say some are good and some are not as good. There isn't much that is different from this game from the previous game in mechanics. However, we have 3 things that is pretty big. We now have a dodging mechanic, an indestructible knife, and 2 characters to play in one and the same story. I will talk about this later, but now let's talk about the indestructible knife and how it's different from the previous game. The knives from these games are not just different in looks, but also in the way they are used. In Resident Evil 2, you could be attacked by zombie in the exactly same way you were attacked in the new game. However, in the previous game, you could use a knife to escape a zombie attack. And now, in Resident Evil 3, this mechanic seems to be completely gone. This is not the only difference from the previous game and the new game. It's also how the knife is used as a combat weapon, or a melee weapon. If you look here when I play as Leon, you see that I am swinging and stabbing at the zombie. And if you look closely at the knife icon, you see that the icon is changing. The knife is getting more and more damaged. And soon the knife won't be much to use to you. However, in Resident Evil 3, Jill's survival knife can you swing and stab how much you want. I swear, this knife has to be made of vibranium. I probably stabbed the zombie around 10 billion freaking times. All of this means that there is only one knife in the entire game. In the previous game, you could find knives, grenades, and even flashbang grenades to actually protect yourself against the zombie. Okay, now let's talk about the dodging mechanic. In Resident Evil 3, you play as Jill Valentine and Carlos Oliveira. Depending on who you play, you get a different ability to avoid the zombies. When you play as Jill, you get a dodging mechanic, so the game kind of feels like a modern version of Dark Souls. And when you play as Carlos, you get a punch mechanic, so you're able to punch the zombies back. So, now, let's talk about the story. As I've said, Resident Evil 3 takes place before and after Resident Evil 2. So in the beginning of Resident Evil 3, you see the beginning of the outbreak in Raccoon City, and in the end, you see how the outbreaks end for now in the Resident Evil storyline. I have mentioned that you play 2 characters in the game, both Jill and Carlos. However, Jill is the main character of this game. She's a tough cop from Raccoon City who are investigating Umbrella from the previous game. Now, when we talk about Umbrella, I think it's time that we talk about the new unstoppable force in Resident Evil 3. In Resident Evil 2, we had Mr. X. Now, we as the player have to deal with Nemesis. Nemesis is similar to Mr. X from the previous game. However, he seemed to be much more dangerous at first sight with his flamethrower and rocket launcher. I will talk about him a little bit later, but let's continue talking about this game. So now I have talked a little bit about the story, and now let's talk about what I personally enjoyed about this game. I very much enjoyed in this game the dodge mechanic. It was a nice feature for this game, and I have to say, when I played Resident Evil 2, I was thinking, why the hell isn't there any kind of dodge mechanic in this game? So good job, boys. I enjoyed this one. I have to say, I enjoyed the character more in this game than the previous one. I did think that Leon and Claire was actually a cool character, but in my opinion, I never cared about them, and I have to say, some of the minor characters in this game actually were much more, I wouldn't say developed, but they were better created, in my opinion, and some of them are even improved from the previous game. Like Carlos' friend Tyrell. As far as I know from the original, in this game, his character was treated with more dignity and he got more to do in this game. And I have to say that that's good improvement of the original game, which is actually what Resident Evil 2 from 2019 was doing with the source material of Resident Evil 2. They took something from the original and made it better, but they still stayed faithful to the original game. We will talk later about how well Resident Evil 3 did with the source material, but we will talk about that later. I have to say, I enjoyed the new monsters in this game, all from the shark in the sewer to the spiders in the electrical fence and all that. It was fun to kill them, and it was a pretty cool design of these monsters, so I have to say, good again game, very good. Okay, now we have talked about the good things in the game, in my opinion. However, I have to say, all the things I have talked about is around 15%, and the rest is 85%, and the 85% of this game wasn't too good. Let me explain. This entire game felt like a horror movie, and I mean that in a good way, but also in a pretty horrible way, considering that this is supposed to be a game. To compare these two games, Resident Evil 2 from 2019 and Resident Evil 3 from 2020, as I said, it's like comparing a movie to a video game. Resident Evil 2 is the video game, and Resident Evil 3 is the movie. How is that? Yeah, let me explain. The reason for Resident Evil 2 was so scary, especially for me. If you don't think this, sure, leave a comment. But the reason why I personally was scared of Resident Evil 2, it was Mr. X. He wasn't any fancy, he didn't have a lot of weapons and all that. He was just a big scary dude who were hunting you. And that was terrifying. However, Nemesis, you kind of know when he will show up, and that's what makes him so predictable and very boring, actually. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that I was not afraid when I played this game, and Nemesis, he was scary sometimes. However, Mr. X was scary all the time. What made Mr. X so terrifying is that he can literally show up at the worst possible situation. However, that's not because the story tells he's supposed to show up here. However, in Resident Evil 3, it feels like, okay, no, Nemesis is gonna show up, and because the story tells him to show up. However, Mr. X kind of felt like he were roaming around in the police station, and he felt like he lived his own life, and he was just gonna kill you and like try to find you. Nemesis, however, he doesn't feel that way, and consider that Nemesis is hunting you down as Jill Valentine. You're supposed to feel like you're hunted by an unstoppable force, but you don't really feel it. I mean, I didn't really feel it after a while. And ironically, every time Nemesis go through some kind of evolution, supposed to make him more scary, he actually become less and less scary, in my opinion, now when I play the game. And I have to say, that is really disappointing, actually. And I have to say, I wasn't crazy about how the world worked in this game. In Resident Evil 2, it kind of felt like an open world, and we're gonna take it easy when I say open world, but you know, you could go to the police station, you can go to the sewer, and you could actually return to the police station to find more supplies. However, in this new game, after, spoiler alert, the train blows up later in the game, you can't actually return of my own knowledge, actually return back to this area, and that is pretty disappointing, actually. It feels like the game creator missed a great opportunity here, and that is to make the game first person. Just look how great Resident Evil 7 is, and I have only watched the gameplay and it's horrifying and I will probably never play it. But just look at how great this looks like. And I mean, horror games, third person, it's scary enough. I mean, look at Resident Evil 2. Think Resident Evil in Raccoon City, but first person. I mean, that would just be so horrifying. Of course, I would probably never make a gameplay about that game, but still, feels like they missed a great opportunity there. And the final thing I want to talk about that I wasn't really that crazy about is the knife mechanic. I have to say, I hate this knife mechanic. I hate that I can't escape from zombies using grenades or knives. And I hate that this knife is indestructible, which means you never have to actually worry about finding another knife to replace this one. You see, knives in Resident Evil 2 was a resource, like many of the things you're collecting. However, here they have just removed a resource so you never have to think about it again, and that is disappointing actually. Really, really, really disappointing. So, okay, final thoughts about this game. I actually really enjoyed Resident Evil 2. Even if I was scared, I actually liked it a lot. And I have to say, when I heard that there was a new game in 2020, I actually were very excited for this new Resident Evil 3 game. However, when I played it, I was really disappointed at what I got. And I am not a die-hard Resident Evil fan, so it is hard for me to actually feel the pain that the Resident Evil community is feeling for this game, because what I've read, the reviews of this game, they are mixed. But after what I have seen of the original game, I can clearly understand why people are angry at this game, because they have removed a lot of stuff from the original game that worked so well. Because that's something that Resident Evil from 2019 did well. As I said before, they took the original story and improved what needed to be improved. However, with this game, they improved a lot of stuff. They have actually improved a lot of stuff. But they have also done stuff worse actually for this game. All of this that I've talked about, what I don't like about the game, and how they have treated the original game in this new game, makes this game boring and a sorry excuse for a sequel from Resident Evil 2 from 2019. That is why I give Resident Evil 3 one lousy zombie shark in the sewer, where it can stay for all I care. I hope that the next Resident Evil 4 that is in development now, have taken a lot of the criticism and will do a better job next time. And even if I played this game and I wasn't really a big fan of it after I played it, I have to say, it is nice that I know that there is no way a worse zombie game than this will come out now in 2020. Right? Right?